But what I have learned is that when we don't allow ourselves to be vulnerable because we lack trust, that we really aren't being our authentic selves. And people really don't get to know who we really are. They only see a facade. Hi everyone, welcome to the third episode of Project She Leads. I cannot believe it is already episode 3. My name is Nori Joaquin and I am your host for this series. If this is your first time here, welcome. I am so glad that you decided to join us. In case you missed the first 2 episodes, let me give you a quick recap. In episode 1, we talked about what leadership is, and last week we talked about how women undermine their leadership. Both episodes are packed full of insights, so I encourage you to watch it, but I will link them below in the event you have not seen them. So this week, we're going to be talking about vulnerability. And to help me unpack this topic is my guest this week, Paris Cannon. Welcome, Paris. I'm so glad to have you on Project She Leads.
Nori, thanks so much for having me. I am so excited to be here. I have been waiting and anticipating to be here. Thank you for having me. So glad to join you all up there as well. Thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit about yourself.
So a little bit about me. So Paris is my name. And first and foremost, I always let people know that I live for Christ. That's the number one thing that I do. And I have been married for 25 years now to my husband, Eric, whose love is my constant pursuit. And we have 2 children, our son, Jalen, and our daughter, Taya, who are our 2 heartbeats and our 2 life beats. And so, yeah, that's pretty much about me. And, I work. Yes,
Okay.
yes, I work. I don't want to forget that. That's important. And so I work for Calvary Church in Naperville, Illinois, and I'm on the pastoral care team there. It is such a privilege. Actually, my work is a privilege and an honor. And so pastoral care, what does that mean, right? Mm-hmm. People ask me that all the time. And so, what we realized at our church is that life can be really hard, especially when you're struggling or hurting or going through a really tough time or hit a season of sorrow. So what we do is we just come alongside people. We just kind of wrap God's love around them, God's unfailing love. We remind them that they are not alone, and we enter into their pain with them. Just be there for them and remind them that they're not alone when they're suffering the most or hurting the most or when they're just vulnerable or exposed. So that's what I do.
So you are such a perfect person then to talk about this topic of vulnerability. This is so tough because so many women struggle with being vulnerable. So why do you think we struggle so much with this?
Oh, vulnerability. When you first mentioned that to me, Nori, I tell you, I wanted to, first and foremost, do some homework, right? So I had some thoughts about it, but I said, you know what? Why don't I see what Western has to say about vulnerability? So I did some digging and I looked it up, and let's define it. Let's see what, how it's defined. So the definition of vulnerability is capable of physically or emotionally being wounded. Wow, that's pretty heavy, guys. Or exposed to the possibility of being attacked or harmed physically or emotionally. So that's pretty heavy, right? So those are some significant or sort of tremendous labels sort of associated with the word vulnerability. Also, too, some other perceptions come to mind that society has kind of told us, over time, that it can be perceived as being weak, incapable. And as I think about the last 2 years, even another word comes to mind like unessential, or even inferior, right? Yeah. When I thought about that last word in particular, inferior, a quote came to mind, and it was by one of our first ladies. And what she said was, "No one can make you feel inferior without your consent."
Wow.
Wow. And that was Eleanor Roosevelt. How powerful is that? And she's absolutely right. So, friends, we don't have to relinquish that sort of control or consent to anyone else in those labels, right? Like who told you that, right? That you're necessarily weaker or incapable, right? Well, we can really stand firm in who we are, and who we were created to be, masterfully, wonderfully, beautifully, our authentic best selves, right? And just stand firm in that, right? Versus turning that over and embracing those perceived notions or ideas of what vulnerable is.
I have to be honest, I actually have struggled with this before. And part of my struggle has been what you're talking about, this perception of being weak, but also struggling with trust. I ask myself, can I trust another person with my vulnerability? Or is this person going to use my vulnerability against me? And so I have just a little story to share with you. Not too long ago, I had my workload at work increase just due to some changes going on. I decided to share with my team, ask them for patience with any delays that I may have responding to their emails or instant messages, and really was just kind of coming from a place of wanting to have open communication. And a couple of weeks later, one of my team members decided to omit me from some emails that I would typically be included in. And when I asked about it, she responded to me in an email and said, well, do you remember a few weeks ago when you said that you had a lot going on? Well, I was just trying to be conscientious of that. So for transparency's sake, my first thought was, oh, so this is my fault. Okay, so now you're taking what I just shared with you to be open, and now you're using that against me. So there are times when you are just trying to share your humanness, be real, and be authentic, and it may be used against you. But what I have learned is that when we don't allow ourselves to be vulnerable because we lack trust, that we really aren't being our authentic selves. And people really don't get to know who we really are. They only see a facade. So it really is important to have confidence and to be authentic, and just trust, your own wisdom. And so thinking about vulnerability, one of the other things that comes to mind is just how much it can really ignite fear in us.
Wow. And you said it, Nori, when you said ignite fear. Just wow, how that right there can just sort of raise the hair on your arms, right? Fear. Um, when I think about fear, and when you said that, um, so many of us, I mean, actually, probably all of us, right? Let's just be real about it and transparent and vulnerable. Let's get vulnerable about that. Face fear. Fear is just a reality of what we deal with, right? Fear of making mistakes, fear of being judged, fear of the uncertainty of the future, fear of, being ill, fear of a tragedy or a trauma, fear of so many, many things that we could be dealing with, of just doing life, right? Find peace and just move forward on the other side of that, and face the fear, move through the fear, but focus on finding peace and strength in one another.
I love that. Absolutely love it. Now, fear doesn't always have to be a negative thing. Sometimes fear can be an indicator that we're actually doing something courageous. And it's important to understand that fear can be a motivating factor in order to move forward. And fear sometimes can be a byproduct of anxiety, as you mentioned. It can also be a byproduct of courageousness, also of unbelief or of trust. And so sometimes when we think about when we're going to actually take on new opportunities, or there's been some open doors, sometimes that will also ignite some fear in us. And we may ask ourselves, is this something that I will succeed at? But maybe if we change the question to, is this worth the risk? Sometimes it makes approaching fear a little bit easier. and will actually help us to move forward.
Yeah.
But let's talk about saying no, because sometimes when you think about opportunities that come our way, fear can actually cause us to want to say no.
Yeah, as women, we take on so many things. We are able to multitask and do just like insurmountable things, right? There's like nothing we can't like in our minds take on and do. Like it's incredible the amount of things that we can do on any given day. And as we look at the end of the day and we look back, it's like, oh my gosh, how did we get all of that done? How did we do all that tackling and blocking? It's just incredible, right? It's okay to stop and pause and just think, wow, this load. How did I really prioritize the day? And I'm on this tightrope and I'm out here, right? How did I get here?
Yeah.
It's okay to say no. It really is. And we have to trust and move through, the possibility of not being afraid that we might fail even. Some of our greatest failures lead to some of our greatest success. They really do. Or our deepest failures lead to our greatest success. And so it's okay to say no and to prioritize. Because when we begin to do that, Nori and friends, when we really begin to do that, we can really dive into our grandest purpose and our most amazing promise.
Yeah. And the Bible does say that we were created to be the helper, which is really a characteristic of leadership. And that really just kind of goes in line with what you were saying about multitasking. And we're also created to be relational, which I think sometimes is why we fear saying no, because we don't want to disappoint other people. But the Bible does say that we should let our yes be yes and our no be no. And so our no can be just as spiritual as all the yeses that we love to say. It is a lot easier for people to receive our no when we're speaking from a place of humility.
Yes, humility. Humility is just a beautiful, beautiful attribute. When I think of that attribute, is one of the strongest. You were just talking about the Bible. Strongest, one of the most beautiful and strongest attributes of our Heavenly Father. As I begin to unpack that, even in my thoughts, in my thinking, I just think of a 3 little word that's packed and loaded with magnitude, and it's really the how. When I think of the how, HOW, and it's a how we approach things, really. And it takes on a posture, right? It's our posture, it's our attitude, it's our approach to things, and it's our approach to people primarily. And it is about how we approach things relationally, emotionally, mentally, physically, and spiritually. And it's how we do life, Nori.
Yeah.
Friends is how we do life, and it's coming from a place of our heart. It's coming from a heart place and a mind place and a soul place, really. And that's what humility is all about. So vulnerability is humility. Vulnerability is freedom. Vulnerability is strength. Vulnerability is love, and vulnerability is beautiful.
It is. It is. Now, what humility is not is thinking less of yourself. So we do need to be careful about the self-talk. And really, humility is about aligning your thoughts of yourself with who God says that you truly are. So we are at the end of this episode. Thank you so much, Paris, for all of your insights and talking about vulnerability.
Oh my gosh, this has been relationally a great vulnerable time with you and all of y'all. I've had so much fun. Thank you, Nori, for having me. I love being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you everyone for watching. Please leave a comment and a thumbs up and join us next week when we will be talking about how to lead self and lead others. Bye.
Bye.